Book report. It's a book report. It's a book report about a movie. 'Cause that makes sense. Welcome back, everybody, to the Reel Weirdos podcast. Today, it's Jesse and Alex bringing you a book report about a movie, because that makes sense. Today, we're talking about Man Bites Dog, 1992 film from three directors, three very French names here. I'll do my best. Let's see. Rémy Belvaux, André Bonzel, and Benoît Poelvoorde. And Alex, you made me watch Man Bites Dog. You made me watch this movie. You're like, I know what we should do for a book report. Man Bites Dog. And I was like, okay. So why don't you tell the people what is Man Bites Dog and why did I watch it?
So it's, on its surface, it's kind of like a, how does one put this? It's almost like a student film documentary of these three like filmmaking student kids that go and they follow this almost infamous like serial killer or assassin on this journey and document his like insane and just absolutely crazy and debaucherous like reign of terror on this city. He's a serial killer, I believe. He's a
serial killer. I don't know how infamous he is, but anyway, continue.
And they just get sucked into the world maybe a little bit more than they'd like to. And they find out some less than savory things, let's say, about their subject of their documentary piece.
It seems like they knew that to begin with, right? We kind of start in the middle of this, and the whole crux of this film, I guess, is that they start helping him with the murders and become more and more involved.
Yep.
But you don't. Okay. So, okay. I have thoughts here.
Yeah, no,
but first I want to know why did I watch this movie? Why? Like, what drew you to this? When did you see it first, and why did you recommend it?
So I saw it. We brought him up a few times, but I saw it with my friend Dustin, who like at one point we would just lock ourselves in his apartment for like 8-10 hours and just watch movies all over the place. And there was one specifically that I always really liked. We watched Straw Dogs, right? And I was like really into this like vein of like, ooh, I want to watch a movie about like serial killers and people having to like fight them off, you know, or like just like that kind of genre. You know, Straw Dogs is about like a family that moves to the English countryside, basically is stalked by like the town's killers, and then Dustin Hoffman and his love interest have to like fight off these sadistic fucks. And so I was like in that mood, right? And he goes, okay, let me show you this movie. And so we watched it, and I actually loved it. And I think what drew me to it originally was the performance of the main actor, Ben, the serial killer.
Okay.
I just thought for some reason it was so like enigmatic, and it was just so like magnetic. I had never seen anyone act like that before, and this whole documentary style thing I thought was like very clever and very interesting. And it very much, I mean, I thought it was a student film, right? So like the whole time I was like, okay, this is going to be a little rough around the edges. This is going to be a little grainy. And I had you watch it though. Let's get to the main crux of this question, right?
Yeah. Is this penance for making you watch Marvel movies?
No, it's more like I made you watch it because, and I didn't like suggest it for a main episode because I don't think
that was a solid choice, by the way. Jeff would,
I feel like he would have hated it, right?
He would have fucking despised doing this. He would have, yeah. It was a good call to just rope me in on this one, for sure.
Yeah. I feel like there was something about this film that I just wanted to talk about. Like, I feel like it just sparked some type of discussion because it's obviously like...
It does. There will.
It's interesting, right? It like sticks out as like it in its own way as like this entity. Narratively, however, there really is no reason why I showed it to you. There's like no there's no like connection here of anything.
Okay, you're just like, this movie's interesting. I want to see what you think about it.
Yeah, it's like interestingly made, I guess.
That's solid point, and that's generally like what we go for here. But I just wanted to like levy some criticism at you with my question.
Oh, dude,
is what I was going for there.
I got to hear what you think, right? Because you've been like buttering me up for the past few days for this.
Yeah, well, I asked you a question, and I'll ask it again in a little while.
Okay,
which is this movie irredeemable? And that's a question that we like on this show. You and I particularly bring this up. And I think we've only actually covered 2 films that I would actually consider legitimately irredeemable in very different ways. One of them is Funny Games, which HBO recommended to me right after I watched this, and I was like, no, I ain't watching that shit again.
Oh, that's awesome.
And the other one was The Matrix Resurrections, another irredeemable film for very, very different reasons. But this movie, I will agree that it's interesting. I actually did not hate watching it, but I was very curious about why I was watching it at all.
Got it.
And I think like it does stand out, right? It does stand out for its documentary styling and for this plot line that I'd never really seen before. But that being said, there wasn't really any core for me to latch onto. And I hated the main guy, the serial killer guy, because we just get right into this movie and I have no idea why these students are helping him commit crimes and filming him commit crimes, like what their morality is there. It doesn't really set that up. The main guy he's either murdering people or he's being completely unlikable. Like in general, like in society, when they go to dinners, like I hate the way that he interacts with the world. He's just very up his own ass, and it was hard for me to see why these people gravitated towards him at all. I guess because he was a murderer. But what it needed for me, I guess, is like, who are these students? Why are they doing this? And it needed to explore who they were a little bit more for me to care, right? And this goes into like having some sort of core of relatability in a film, which you don't always need, I guess, but I just didn't understand. It's just like scenes of killing people, scenes of disposing of bodies, and then scenes of them like drinking. And I didn't like anybody in the film. And I was just like, I don't know. It was weird to watch.
Did you like narratively then? Did you like the end? Was it nice at least then to see like all of these unlikable people just die? Spoilers. Everyone dies at the end. That was the weirdest part, right?
Fuck. I watched this 2 days ago. I already forgot the end.
So the end, the way it spirals out of control is that like they find out that obviously he's been pissing off people, right? He's been murdering people. And he pisses off these Italian gangsters. And there's like a competing serial killer that they find out is being filmed by a competing documentary crew.
Oh, dude, that happens like halfway through the movie, though.
Yeah, and then and then that's what I mean leads to the end of it, like being like they're being hunted as well by this Italian like gang, and they slowly pick off each one of Ben's like his love interest with the flute.
Right. Oh yeah, didn't they stick a flute up her ass?
Yeah, it gets real debaucherous and disgusting.
This movie, it does. Okay, this is not a movie I would recommend to anybody.
Yeah, I'm
just gonna say that right now. If you're listening, don't stop and go watch it. It's not the worst thing. Like I said, I actually don't think it's irredeemable because I didn't hate it completely in the way that I would irredeemable movies, but it also just didn't have anything going on for me outside of like the core of, oh, that's kind of a neat concept that's like interestingly presented.
Yeah.
But the fact that there's those like horrible rapes, like, dude, when they go to the bigger lady's apartment and rape her in excruciating detail,
and the film crew like dives into it as well.
Yeah, the film crew's like getting their jollies off, and then you cut to the next morning and she's just like eviscerated on the table. I was like, I really don't need to be watching this movie. And it's like, you can tell these kind of tales about bad people and have them still be kind of like fascinating. Like Tarantino does this very well.
Mm-hmm.
Even when Tarantino makes like a horrible murderer who's unconscionable, they're still like fun to watch, interesting personalities. This movie didn't have that. It just had scenes of murdering civilians in their homes. And I was like, is the point here just to like unnerve you, to be like, this could happen to you? It's so easy. It's like, what's the point, right? What's the point? I already know people are awful and there are people out there like this. What's the point?
Yeah.
You know, like, what do you think the point of the movie was?
So for me, that it's really hard because the film crew that's in the film, they were actually like very, very young, fledgling, how do I say this, filmmakers. One of them,
you mean in real life?
In real life, yeah, excuse me. And Rémy Belvaux, actually, he ended up committing suicide, I believe, at some point in like the early 2000s. But,
oh shit!
Yeah, they didn't really flower into anything. They didn't really have a career, and I think this is like the only thing that they made. So the way that this film sticks out to me, and I'll dovetail in this to why I think this film, like what this film is about, but it sticks out because it's like, it's one of those, like, it seems almost meteoric or cosmic. Like it's just come out of the sky, like searing through the sky with this really, really unhinged, and I mean unhinged, like artistic audacity and like visual panache, if you will. But it's just original in its like presentation, right? Like the way that the film opens is like, I think it's a really long shot, and he's like dumping bodies into a river, and he's talking about so matter-of-factly, like National Geographic wise, like the difference of weight in bodies and the different things that you need to do.
Yeah, there is like a cheekiness going on here for sure.
And so the genre of the film is like classified as a crime black comedy mockumentary. And I'm like, okay, so basically, I know, isn't that weird? But like,
I can see it. It wasn't funny to me, but I can see it.
I'm like, what if it's like Spinal Tap or, you know, Best in Show, or any of the like comedic mockumentaries that are like extremely famous and well known. They always have this very humorous and light tone to them. And yet this movie is like that in a sense, but it's like very, very dark and violent and graphic. But I do agree with you. There is some overt, like, vice signaling is a term that I like to use. Where it's
what
just
does that
like,
mean?
It's basically the difference of, it's like the opposite of quote unquote virtue signaling, where it's like, we smoke cigarettes, we kill people, we drink alcohol, we blah blah. It's like kids who want to be Charles Bukowski, and even Charles Bukowski to a degree, right? Like it was just like, God damn, dude, everything you're writing about is whores and and drinking and LA and smoking cigarettes, you know, and like failing health. And it's like, okay, we get it. It's dirty, it's seedy, it's mucky. That definitely happens a lot with this film. I just think this film is like extremely, it's just very chaotic and raw. It's definitely raw.
Was it still as interesting to you the second time revisited? I don't know how often you've revisited it. Is this something you watch every once in a while?
The second time that I've watched.
Okay, so since the long ago.
Yeah.
Well, how did it seem to you now?
So it seemed more open to me now, in the sense that I found more things that it was more open to criticism. Excuse me, is what I meant to say.
Okay. Yeah.
For me now, like the main actor, the role, while I still think it's pretty good, pretty exuberant, it just doesn't impress me as much because I've seen more films and I've seen so many more nuanced performances on the scale that like it just wasn't as groundbreaking to me. The violence was fine as far as like, it doesn't get exceptionally gory for me, right? But the treatment of other humans in the film, within the plot and the narrative was much more disturbing to me this time. Like the old lady, that scene in the apartment, where he
the complete disregard for human life on on the most basic level.
Yeah, like that part, like all of his charm wasn't there for me the second time.
No, he had no charm. In fact, he had anti-charm.
Yeah.
Even in the moments where he was supposed to be charming, I hated him. Yeah. When he was at the art gallery, that sticks out in my mind because he's saying what he thinks about art very, very loudly. He's one of those guys. He wants everybody to know that he knows. It's I don't know. It is an interesting performance. I think it's like a pretty good performance, but I don't know. It's hard for me to say what this movie lacked for me other than to say humanity, but obviously it's about serial killers. But I think what it was missing, and I might have said this earlier, is seeing some sort of dissent within the documentary crew, because as far as I can see or am concerned, they started out as completely amoral. They're helping him pretty early on. And there's I didn't understand. And I think to the point about it being graphic, there are moments where it goes a little bit over the top, like we talked about the rape scene. But even then I was it didn't disturb me exactly because I've seen a shitload of movies and I know it's fake. I don't know, a movie can still get under my skin, but this one didn't. And I struggle to say exactly why. I was just kind of confused the whole time.
Yeah, okay, so it's interesting because it's just such a fragmented movie as far as storyline goes, and it's definitely not traditional in any way, right? So
no, it plays into the documentary stuff. You only see what is documented. I mean, there are even moments where they're filming him and you can't hear what he's saying because the sound guy is over there, running around looking for, I don't know, a banana or something.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that it's just, it's hard because I don't really have an opinion either way about it. The first time I watched it, I was like, man, this movie is just interesting. There's something about this movie that is peculiar, and it's peculiar in its making and in its execution. But at the time I was I don't have anyone to talk to about this movie. Seriously.
I will do my best. It is part of the Criterion collection. People have noted that this is a film of value. I don't know if it's because I'm just seeing it with fresh eyes in 2022 when this kind of thing doesn't feel as audacious now. Audacious.
No,
I don't know if that's
true.
Part of it.
Right? And it's interesting to think about man, this movie is disturbing for us in 2022. What was it like when it came out then? Mid-90s?
I mean, we have the whole history of Tarantino. We'll bring him up again. This came out the same year as Reservoir Dogs,
Yeah.
Which is a movie that fucked with people's heads because it was really graphic and intense. And it's probably in no way as vicious as this film, not quite as much, or at least the times where it is vicious, it has this overriding style, like when Michael Madsen is ripping off the guy's ear and shit.
Well, I was going to say that it sets that up extremely well, though, that he is a villain and is a bad guy. And the audience and Quentin Tarantino made it very clear that you are rooting against him and you were rooting for Mr. Orange, right? As he's bleeding out of his fucking stomach. But yeah, the interesting thing is it's really easy to find this, but when I was doing my research, I was just doing my research on Benoît Poelvoorde, the actor,
right,
and the Belgian guy. And he actually became a member of the Cannes Film Festival jury in 2004 by request of Quentin Tarantino, who was a big fan of Man Bites Dog.
Okay, I could see that. I could definitely see Quentin being a fan. Yeah.
Right? But I agree with you. There's something about Quentin's movies that we draw back to this other term a lot. This humanity. There's nothing in this film I'm why is everyone except for the innocent people so devoid of any moral fiber or standing or direction. Like the first minute that if I was making a documentary film like this and someone was dumping bodies into a river, I'd be like, okay, we're going to the police after this, right? Like this can't continue. Like
nobody has that conversation with each other. There's nothing to lead you to believe that there's any morality anywhere. Yeah, and that's why I said, like, I think this movie would have been more impactful if it was a descent where you see the documentary crew, like, having that conversation and being like, are we okay with this? And then slowly going over to the dark side, you know? But as it stands, it's just like, oh, I guess we're killing people now. And I was, as the audience was like, oh, I guess they're killing people now. Okay, I guess I'm watching this now. We can get past me saying the same thing over and over again, though, in terms of that, and talk about what is interesting about this movie, because it is interesting. I did ask you about the irredeemability, but I think like it is doing something different. It is having this sort of tale where you have these murderers, and the interesting part about it isn't really that the documentary crew gets involved, because there's no sort of push and pull there. It's just the sort of like matter-of-fact nature of it, right? Where they'll go and murder people and then they'll go out for drinks and talk about like opera, you know?
Yeah.
And that's where I could see Tarantino doing it. Tarantino would have done it and had his characters be likable, even if they were awful.
Yeah.
Or just, you know, Michael Madsen. Let's use him as an example in Reservoir Dogs. He's not likable, but there's something to him, right? Like, I don't know if it's just because of the filmmaking. Yeah, he's got panache and style, like doing the little dance with the music.
Yeah.
When he's walking over with the razor blade, there's something there where you're enjoying watching that on like a cinematic level, and that pulls it upward.
Yeah. This film is flat, definitely, like in that sense, right? Because it's like black and white, and this documentary style lends to it. You don't have a lot of scenes that you can really like, I don't know. There's like no music to set the scene and stuff like that, because it's a documentary, right? So I get what you're saying. And it's funny because Michael Madsen in Reservoir Dogs, you could tell that he was dangerous and he was unhinged, right? But he was still somewhat contained within the fictional universe of a character that Quentin Tarantino had created. Whereas in this film, I think what is interesting is because it's a documentary, Ben is so unhinged and he's so bothersome as just a person. But in those moments when he's interacting with people just normally and he's not killing them, he is very realistic to me. Even though he is a humongous asshole, he's like, I'm just like, oh my God, I've met people like you, like the art moment, right?
I had that same thought, man. And I think that's why it is interesting, why it sort of dovetails into its own like little reality, is because of that realism element where it's like, it does feel in large part very real and very grounded. Like you say, Ben is a real person.
Yeah.
And it made me think of people like him that I've met at fucking bars or whatever. And I'm like, are you a murderer?
Are you serious? That's awesome.
I don't know.
I think mostly too, one thing that really drew me to it was like, okay, so the second time, talking about more philosophical, theoretical things about the film and what is it trying to say? So, you know, like what is the point of the film? Is this film making a very strange like overture about art and artists in general? Like, can you get lost in this psychosis of, no, we have to depict what is happening for art's sake, until there is no line that separates you from what you are depicting, right? You are this murderous, raping, pillaging film crew of kids who it's like, it gets into this very interesting philosophical debate about like even documentarians, right? Like at what point do you put the camera down, you know, and you're like, I can't fucking do this. Like, right. I don't care what I'm making. I don't care how vital this will be. You know, it'd be like filming the R. Kelly documentary or like the Scientology documentary and being able to like get into a room where someone high up is like sexually abusing someone. Like, you're just like, I need to film this. The world needs to know this, right? Like, but then you just
start sexually abusing them as well.
No, well, that is yeah.
Right? See, that's where the disconnect happens, right? Because you're like, no, they wouldn't start doing that. This is insane. Who are these people?
Yeah, I know.
I don't know. I had that thought, or I had a broad similar thought when he's like drunk and he wanders out of the bar yelling, "I am cinema."
Yeah.
I was like, what's he saying here?
Mm-hmm.
What's he saying here? And I don't know what he was saying there, Alex. I think they were trying to say something. The larger point of this movie, I will say, is more or less completely lost on me unless it's more basic than I'm thinking it is, which is maybe that. It's like, oh, where do we draw the line when we make art? Or like, I don't know. These things happen all around you. Ooh, spooky. You're like, I know that.
Right? It's hard.
I know that.
It's like hard to like, it's some of the takes on it are like, it just seems so vanilla, right? Like,
that's the thing. I think a lot of, I didn't read much criticism. Maybe I should have, but I would imagine that the things that they say this movie are about would feel very obvious and kind of hackneyed. You're like, oh, it's about this grand thing, and where's the line with art? And I'm kind of like, in some movies I can see that, and I can see that being like legit. With this movie, I kind of want them to blow it out their ass a little bit. But it's hard because it is an audacious film for 1992. I don't know. I don't exactly know if things like maybe it pushed boundaries that I'm just not seeing because I'm seeing it 30 years later.
Yeah, no, it's one of like one of my favorite things, I guess, about being not just a consumer of art, but being like, you know, someone who studied it for a degree, is that like there's this ever-changing consumption of it, and people are constantly going in and out of style. And I'm not talking about cancel culture here, right? I'm just talking about what is popular artistically at certain points in time and how it then ends up influencing the next generations of people. So like I can see the locus point here of like where Quentin Tarantino might have gotten some inspiration, right?
Yeah.
And leave it to the Europeans to really, you know, push the boundaries. It's like,
it's French. This movie is fucking French. It is loudly, racistly French.
Oh man, some of that was really, really unnerving as well.
You got okay, there's also a moment where he starts quoting poetry and it goes off with this shot of him running naked along a beach, and I was like, what the fuck, France?
Yeah, I know.
Come on, French cinema. It was just too French. I was like, come on.
Yeah, you know, it sucks because I feel like there isn't a lot of criticism that I found written by it, but you are right. You are correct in the sense that it's like, it's kind of like the tagline or like the, you know, the for Y tu mamá también. Like, it's hard to avoid that, right? Two boys travel the world and find each other or some shit like that.
I love and each other. Friendship.
Exactly.
It's hard, dude, because I really like, I like a lot of cinema that pushed the boundaries in like the 60s, like Fellini and stuff like that.
Yeah. And
then going forward, you have, I mean, I just talked shit about a guy running along a beach quoting poetry, but I like Terrence Malick movies. Oh, so like, which is like the ultimate incarnation of that. It's just American, I guess.
No, that's true.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, where's the border? Like, why does this frustrate me when something like that doesn't? Like, how do we quantify that?
I was going to actually ask that because it seemed, okay, so I don't know yet if we found something that really irks me the wrong way. I mean, maybe it's shitty dialogue. I don't know. But with Jeff, it's sex, right? With you, I wanted to like ask you, like, do you not like the really edgy, violent things? Like, I'm not talking movie violence. I'm talking depraved violence, right? Like Funny Games was cinematically depraved violence. It wasn't just like bang, bang, shoot 'em up. They're in my house. I need to save my family. It was like, I'm getting beaten in the face with a golf club while these dudes are like laughing at me, right? And then this film is like, you see this dude screaming in this woman's face and then gleefully turning to the camera and being like, see, I didn't even have to use any weapons right there because I saw that she had heart medication here on the table. I was just going to set her heart all fucking, and you're just like, ugh. It makes you feel disgusting. like with humanity, you know?
Yeah, you might be getting close to what gets my goat. I haven't really thought about it in those terms specifically. Okay. But yeah, I see I guess you could quantify it as cruelty without beauty. Like, I'm okay with a movie being absolutely horrifying and depraved and monstrous even, because that's interesting. And those moments can be leveraged to create an interesting narrative. But when that is the only narrative, then I have a problem. Like, my favorite example that I always bring up is the human centipede. It's just, that is absolutely cruelty without beauty. There's nothing to say or to be gleaned. It is just monstrous to its characters for no discernible purpose other than to be like masochistic. Funny Games is like that. I could not stand the gloating like that the movie was doing about what it was doing. I fucking hated it.
Yeah.
This movie, it didn't go to that level, but it is analogous to Funny Games.
It's a little where more
I was like, okay, what's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point here? And it is kind of interesting the way that it depicts its reality, the way that they'll go do the murders and then go get fucking, clams and stuff like that.
Yeah.
but I still miss the broader point. And this is possibly just a me thing. Like, maybe it's me just missing the point of this. But I was like, why? Why am I being shown this? And if it's 1992 and this kind of thing had never been done before, okay, I can see it. I'll give some leeway there. But in terms of like, as its own narrative, if we're going to divorce it from like cinematic extremities of the time, then I don't understand the draw. It's just, it's about a guy that I don't like, who's completely amoral, being followed around by people I don't like because they just get in on the action with no like reservations.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I guess it could happen. Oh, is this a commentary on the extremity of art that we will go to?
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess.
I think
if you
honestly,
want it to be.
When you boil it down, it only can be that, because it really lacks any substance to be anything else, right? And I don't mean that in like a really negative way, because I still do like the film, but it does lack substance to like boil it down to anything. It's like, so I'll read you two of my favorite reviews that I found of it, right? And one is by this
maybe
guy
I wanted it to be more movie. Maybe it did its job so well that I was like, oh, it's just a documentary. Well, I didn't think about it like that, but
it's very bare. It's very stark, right? I don't know. It sucks. I'll read the reviews later.
If you had like a couple moments in the film where Rémy like really cogitates on the meaning of his actions and why he's doing this, that could have completely transformed the movie. But instead, honestly, 3/4 of the way through, you see him raping the woman, and I'm like, I'm out. I'll finish watching the movie, but I'm out.
All three of them just arguing. Rémy could have been in, right? Because he was a fucking jackass, it seemed anyways. But like, if the other two were like having some moral conundrum, it was the other two, yeah. If they were like, oh my god, like we shouldn't be doing this, and like there was like a shot of them arguing, or like somehow the serial killer Ben like leveraged Remy's favor to like kill his friends, like it would have made it extremely interesting at that point. But before I get to the reviews, I actually want to comment on what you were saying, because I had a question for it, and it just fits perfectly into what you were saying about like the depravity without beauty. And so I was going to ask you, and I had this written down in my notes, what is the difference? And I don't mean this rhetorically. I actually am genuinely asking this.
Okay.
What is the difference between a film like this and a horror film, like a horror slasher film, where it's like I'm following people get like absolutely like mauled or something like that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I had this exact thought actually when I was thinking about the film the next day. I had the same thought. I was like, well, I like horror movies that do this. And I think it's because, okay, we can draw a line under horror here and sort of like explore that a little bit. Because a horror movie can be many things. When a horror movie does this, I'm generally okay with it when it's like a monster or an alien or something, because that brings in this whole like science fiction-y element. I think the differentiation is when it's a person doing it, it transforms it into a completely different thing.
Yeah.
Right. And you could call a serial killer movie a horror movie, perhaps like Seven or something like that. But it really delves into this. It becomes a whole different genre when you're dealing with the horrors of the human psyche, which are infinitely more horrifying than any monster we've ever conjured.
Yeah.
Cinematically or otherwise. People are the true monsters.
No, definitely, though. It's true. Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. Like, if this movie was like about people following a monster around as it murdered people, I would have been like, wow, this is interesting.
This is straight fucking like he's just dressed in like a Barney costume.
Yeah, like, we found this monster. It calls himself James. It somehow knows the human language. So they're like doing it on that level. But yeah, when it's indulging in really intense human cruelty with no discernible like dimensionality, I think that's what I have a problem with. And the dimensionality thing is an arguable point. Like, people like funny games, they see something of value in that for some reason. And this one too as well. Maybe it is as simple as showing / exploring a psychopath is interesting enough. Yeah. For me, it's a movie. You gotta do a little bit more.
That's true. I mean, definitely that's definitely where it like falls short for me. The second like watch round, right? It's like for me, it wasn't like, why am I watching this? I was like, okay, this seems important, or I know it's important. And I love how you brought up the dialogue of like, I am cinema, right? And it's just like, okay, what the fuck are you saying? Because you're saying something here, you know, and like it's tongue in cheek.
Is he, or are they just trying to say something, you know? Like,
yeah, and that's the thing. Is it like, is what you are saying the attempt to say something? Is that the whole focus? Getting real meta here, right? Which will lead me into the reviews that I really think kind of hit on the nose. They are kind of injected with that general overall like hallmarky kind of thing. But there's this one guy his name is Emmanuel Levy. He's got a beautiful big old handlebar mustache. From EmmanuelLevy.com. And he writes, misunderstood. This original Belgian film is a satirical stab at serial killers, our new, quote, cultural icons. The moral was misinterpreted by some critics. And then you have Tom Meek, who says, Man Bites Dog is a deliriously sharp reflection of society's secret thirst for blood and human spectacle, while hypocritically maintaining a stiff moral chin. A unique, one-of-a-kind that's not for all. So I think that these two guys really hit the nail on the head as far as like what the film is doing. But I think it's up to debate on whether or not it's like executed in a way that is meaningful or even profound, right? It's like the equivalent of a junior high school student discovering like a death metal album and then for the next week can only talk about death and existentialism for like 2 shallow minutes in any discussion, right? And so it's like, I don't know, where do I draw the line with it? Is it deep?
Yeah.
Or is it just kind of, I don't want to say it's lazy. I want to say it's much more humble than funny games. Like if I was the teacher of a film class and some student submitted this compared to another student who submitted funny games, I would be like, okay, one of you is a humongous pompous asshole.
This is head and shoulders above funny games in terms of whatever, in terms of everything. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not as like cinematically competent as funny games. But I can see those arguments in the reviews, but they're also the same kind of arguments that one would bring forth about funny games, right? Where I don't quite buy into the meta. Like, I think maybe some critics are overthinking it because that's their job. And when you see a movie like this that is evocative, like you kind of have to grasp for something.
Yeah.
And maybe that's them grasping. I don't know. I don't know how deeply they've thought about this. Or how deeply I've thought about this, you know?
I mean,
like,
I used to do that all the time.
Going back to the moment of, like, I am cinema.
Uh-huh.
Right? That that scene was so frustrating. Because like you said when we talked about it earlier, you're like, okay, what are you trying to say? Mm-hmm. And I was like, I have no idea. Is the idea that like, oh, we indulge in cinema and cinema is violent and we have a culture of violence where we appreciate killers in cinema. You're like, yeah, no shit. Mm-hmm. Like, we know that. I don't know.
No.
Alex.
No, that's super valid, dude, because that's like one of my most common gripes with things, right? Is like, I talked about it in the Batman episode. I'm like, okay, we get it. The villain is pretty disturbed mentally, you know? I'm like, can we add some style and panache to it? Same way, dude.
So that's my same criticism of this. I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. The world is cruel. We as people like to watch things that are cruel. Uh-huh. Let's make a thing that's cruel, that's a meta commentary on cruelty. And yeah. I don't know, I guess that, like, same thing as funny games is like, I see that. That's pretty obvious to me that you're doing that. But that's not interesting to me.
It's not interesting, I think, generationally either, you know? And it just goes to show, like, while I like this film, it's a hallmark of a film that does not have staying power. It might have hit so much differently in the 90s, right? And
like, yeah, we've made that point. And you're like, this could just be the fact that I'm seeing it 30 years later when this has no bite anymore, ironically.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah.
Or at least not for somebody who watches as many fucking movies as I do.
No, but like even just art in general, even commercials and like TV. I mean, we don't watch a lot of TV and commercials in general, but like everything.
You think we're numb? You think we're just numb at this point?
I do think that, I think at some point it's jaded and like you get to like this really interesting level of, well, now the subversive mode of like, this ironic shtick is now like the satirical is now like the dominant mode of art.
Oh, dude, satire is dead.
Oh, dude,
I mean, reality is so fucking absurd now.
Yeah.
That among satirists, they will say satire is dead. You know?
Yeah. And so when you have things that are genuinely human now, that are really heartfelt or like, you know, come from a place of humility, human humility, it sticks out and they're starting to shine just a little more, you know?
That's why we got Coda.
I mean, yeah, you get things like Coda, but you also get things like that were ahead of its time. Like I'm talking like if we go to David Lynch's Twin Peaks, right? He has this whole dark universe, but his main character is like cookie cutter 1940s FBI agent. Just totally super.
Oh no, he's got his own eccentricities. He's a fun character. Come on.
Oh, for sure, definitely. But he's like eccentric in how campy and how like homey he is, right? And it like it was so biting and refreshing at the time to just be like, oh, okay. I mean, for me when I was watching it, you know, it's like we're in this age of like anti-heroes and like the dark, damaged, kind of weird hero. Where when I watch someone like Dale Cooper in Twin Peaks, I'm like, yes, just give me the cherry pie fucking American, you know, like baseball hero. Like, I just want someone that's clean cut and that is like good through and through.
It's nice to have some dimensions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You gotta have some dimensions, some color grading. Can't just all be gray or I'm like, meh. You know what the most disturbing thing to me about this movie was? The fact that it didn't disturb me at all.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
I was like, I mean, there were some genuinely fucked up images where I was like, oh, okay, that's fucked up. But generally, like, the movie would cut very quickly in like this understated way to him blasting somebody in the fucking face, and I didn't bat an eyelid.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, what's the next scene? And thinking about that, I was like, man, I don't know if it is just weird. We're so overstimulated now that this doesn't do much.
No,
I don't know. It's weird because it's only operating on the level of violence, right? You could do the same thing, but with like some emotions attached somewhere, and I would have felt those, you know, presumably. But because it's just violence, I was like, okay, it's violence. It's like watching a car chase with no story attached.
I did feel a pang of like emotion when you find
when
out
he murders the kid.
Well, no. I mean, like that whole thing, I was desensitized to all the things that he was doing to other people. But when like the other serial killer or assassin people started to catch up to him and they like murdered his girlfriend and then murdered his parents, I actually felt like a little sad for a moment in that. But the movie in no way does that operate on any human level, right? It's not like I'm some like boy that grew up that is trying to find my parents and the whole world is against me, you know? And like, at least in Titane, there's like this feeling that like this violence is justified because like the world is like almost against this woman.
Dude,
you know?
Titane gets in on the like brute psychological level that people operate on.
Yeah.
To like, it's like bearing the nerve. This movie has no psychology attached to it. Or if it does, it's just meta psychology about you, the viewer, and society, in quotation marks. But it doesn't do it itself.
No, not at all. It's like watching Fred Astaire murder people, right? It's like so nonchalant and just like the way that they try and make him like come off as like so witty, or the way that, you know, he Benoît played it up to be like super witty is like very disturbing and very unsettling and almost...
Yeah, I think maybe I'm a nerd to that now. You know, like it's been 20 years since American Psycho, for fuck's sake.
Oh, yeah.
We've had a million of those since then. So it's a good performance, but I don't know. Maybe me saying like, I don't understand the point is another way of getting at that. Like I didn't understand what other dimension it was working on. You know, it's just this flat plane of we murder people and we're kind of silly and like regular people about it.
Yeah.
And then there's nothing else. And I was like, and then what? Like,
right.
Let's go deeper here. Let's explore this. But it doesn't do any exploring. It just shows you and like lets you do the work, which in some movies can work. In this movie, it just felt like maybe that's a cop-out. If you're gonna like ascribe any philosophy to it, then it's all on you.
Yeah.
You know, like the movie doesn't do much for that. Maybe it has its ethos that I'm just not seeing. But once again, I think maybe it's just, you know, like we've said, those critiques you brought in. Like, it's talking about how we like serial killers and we're disaffected. And you're like, yeah, all right.
Yeah, exactly, right? You're just like, okay, that's
like, yes, that is true.
Times over. We get it now.
That is true. I know this.
Yeah, it's not quite as like sharp as it once was, right?
No, it's not sharp. It's not sharp. It has moments where I was like, ooh, that's a little cutting, but on by and large, you know, not really.
No, I love the thing you said about American Psycho though, for sure, because it's like we get it, guys. We get it. Like there are toxic aspects to our society where it's like I don't know. I just can't. It's hard to see.
Yeah, we're sick. Like we are sick. We are definitely mentally and spiritually sick. Maybe try to answer why instead of just telling me that though, because it's like I know that.
I feel like by doing this documentary style, they really relieved themselves of like that almost like artistic duty to do that, right? It was like, oh, we're just showing you this. This is just like a documentary style. It's less of answering the question and more just like, look at this. You know, it's like, and then you just walk away from your art exhibit.
See, I'm open though with this film. If anyone's listening and you have like an idea about the ethos here and like why this movie is interesting, please let us know. I'm interested to dialogue about it for sure. Like I'm not just writing it off. Like I said, I did ask you about it being irredeemable for obvious reasons. I think we've covered that fairly well, where there's like no other dimension besides the killing.
Yeah.
But I think it like there's something to it though. And I could see why you brought it to my attention. And I do think it was interesting. I did not hate watching it. I just kind of wondered why I was watching it. You know, still coming back to that. I'm still not sure why. It didn't... It's not going to be memorable. I already had forgotten the ending. A couple of the images will stick in my brain, although I don't want them to.
Yeah.
But other than that, I was like, oh, this guy's a douche and he murders people. Great.
Nice.
Cool. Good for you, movie.
I feel like something in my brain was like somewhere. This movie was like locked away somewhere in my brain, and watching Antichrist, Titan, Enter the Void, something about those films, like something along that vein, just woke this memory up again. I was like, huh,
I could see that. I
need to revisit this movie, and it was obviously extremely European. So yeah.
So what would qualify for you as an irredeemable film? Like what enters that camp?
Okay, so definitely The Matrix Resurrections, like The Matrix 4 is definitely number one, even over Funny Games, as far as the ones we've done on this podcast.
Agreed.
And I think it's because of like that one's
Funny
hard.
Games was at least trying to do something.
Yeah.
The Matrix was just an affront to everything I hold dear. It's an affront to art. It's an affront to thought, creativity, world building,
human relations, like
acting,
the advancement to maybe global peace.
it is possibly I've never hated watching something more.
Yeah, dude.
It dethroned Funny Games. Funny Games I'd hated.
Something
okay.
About that.
I had a metaphor, right? Maybe a simile. I don't know. Let me construct this. So Jeff likened Funny Games, watching Funny Games, to somebody coming in your tea and then making you drink it and then like smiling at you from across the table. You're like, hey, you're drinking that tea with my cum in it. And it's so fucking smug and self-satisfied. You're like, I hate you. I hate you. I hate you. This movie is like somebody gives you some tea and they're like, hey, there's blood in that tea. And then you drink it and you're like, oh yeah, there is. And they're just sitting there like impassively, like, yeah, it's got some blood in it. And you're like, yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
I don't know if what my broad point here is, but just likening it to that. I don't know. Maybe that says something to somebody.
I mean,
it's very matter of fact.
It is like,
it doesn't feel super pretentious, I guess.
Exactly. And something irredeemable is like when the filmmaker or the film is so sure that it is good, it's so sure in what it is saying that it doesn't care at all about the audience. And I mean that in the weirdest way. Like when I say it doesn't care about the audience, like that is a duty for art, for any artistic rendering or manifestation. Like you can say, oh, I'm just doing this for my own kicks. But the act of making art and then producing it and putting it out into the public sphere must always come with the caveat that the audience is involved and is an active member.
I don't agree.
You don't think so?
I don't think artists really owe anything to their fans. Well, maybe that's a bad way of putting it, because they sort of made you successful, but
not in that sense. It's like the thing that you talked about it being there's like a tacit agreement that we have with art and the things that art say and the things that like art does. I feel like that works two ways. But I get what you're saying about them not like, you don't owe your audience anything, I guess. You just should probably keep that in mind.
Not to the extent where you have to make things for them.
Yeah.
I think if you're an artist, you should make things for you. But you need to understand also that we can also call you out for it being a giant pile of crap when you do. This movie isn't that. It feels very genuine. It feels like they had a vision, and like I like the way that you say humble. I've kind of warmed up to that phrase in terms of this movie, because I think you're right. I think it's like some guy is doing an audacious project with some measure of idea attached to it.
Yeah.
But mostly just to do it. I don't know how great the artistic like statement of it was in their head.
Technically, it doesn't do anything revolutionary either.
But it doesn't make me angry.
Okay.
You know?
Yeah. I feel like what makes me angry is, okay, let's set up a scene real quick. You're at like an open mic.
Neo walks in.
Oh, God, no. Jesus. Fucking Trinity drinking her coffee with her real family. So you're in like an open mic, right? Not a comedy one, but like a poetry one, you know, or like a short story one for like a school or an art club or whatever. You have people that have worked very hard on their pieces, people that, like you have said, have measured out some type of idea or meaning, and they go up and they do it. And then there's a 30-minute moment where they're like, okay, does anyone want to come up and do anything impromptu? And someone that is just so captivated and enthralled by the like gusto of the performances gets up and does like slam poetry, right? And immediately wants that to be legitimized as art because it was emotion, or it was because it was like an expression of how they were feeling in some way. So I don't ever buy into that shit. If you just have an outburst of emotion, I equate that to what a child does, and I don't think that that's what an artist does. I think an artist puts that emotion through like some type of scope or refinement and then creates something, right? So I feel like that this film did that in a way that failed a little bit and it stumbled, but at least, like I said, it humbly tried to do that. Whereas The Matrix 4 is just like slam poetry, right? It's like, I'm great, listen to me, I'm going to vomit.
Dude,
for
I still don't even know what the fuck that movie was. I really
see
don't.
What I'm saying,
I could
right?
probably do, if I had the time and inclination and skills, I could probably do a whole like 4-hour fucking video essay on that movie. But
you see the distinction that I'm making though, right? Where
I
it's
do.
Like,
I do.
I hate that. I just hate the like art for like the like spontaneous, just like outburst of emotion. I'm like,
can you think of any other movies that do that? Like, what are the movies that make you the most angry? Probably the cynical ones, right? Like the Fast and Furiouses of the world.
Oh,
that
definitely.
Kind of
but those don't ever. Those aren't ever trying to sell themselves as something like, hey, we're saying something deep about.
No, they
like
know what they are.
Life.
They know what they are.
Yeah. Even the Marvel movies are the same way. Like, I have to give them that credit. Like, they're not trying to be like fucking, Lawrence of Arabia. But there are films like, dude, Crash, which won the Oscar, which we will have to do an episode on it one day, like a hate episode.
I'm so down.
It's like that. Like, I don't even know how to explain it, but Crash is one of those films.
When something is so far up its own ass, it can't even see the trees anymore.
Yeah, and
something
it's
like
just
that.
like emotion. It's just like spitting and regurgitating out like human emotion, and it thinks like just doing that makes it okay, right? Like, I don't know. Like, you can buy.
It's weird. There are different ends of the
steak.
spectrum. There are different ends of the spectrum, right? You have like those cynical ass movies make me angry, like the Uncharted shit like that will make me angry. A Crow sequel definitely makes me angry. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Oh, it's coming.
But yeah, and then on the complete other end of the spectrum, you have like a total auteur piece, like Funny Games, but it's just so satisfied with the cum that it jerked off into your tea that I hate it.
Yeah.
It like knows its cum tastes good. And you're like, no cum tastes good. Get out of here. Michael Haneke.
There's a film called Savages that I saw a long time ago, which is fucking horrendously bad. That follows along the same
veins. That sounds familiar.
Veins. I don't even want to talk about what the plot is, but
what is this? Savages.
It's shit. Some gangster wannabe movie.
With Aaron Taylor Johnson?
Yes, and Taylor Kitsch, Benicio del Toro, Salma Hayek, and Blake Lively.
It's an Oliver Stone film.
Oh, dude, it's so fucking bad. Emile Hirsch is in it as well. It's one of the worst movies I've ever seen.
Oh my God, we might have to do this one too. Dude, I like Oliver Stone.
I do too, right? Like, I love the beach. Like, we did a book report on the beach. And
that wasn't Oliver Stone.
Wait, I always fuck it up.
That was Danny Boyle.
I always fuck it up. Yeah. Danny Boyle.
Similarly great director, though. Great director, yeah.
But no, Oliver Stone has done films that I have liked. So I think he did my favorite
Platoon?
film he did.
Speaking of fucking serial killers, Natural Born Killers, man. That's one of the greatest, like, serial killer movies of all time.
Yeah. I mean, the serial killer genre would be cool. Honest. I mean, there is a serial killer genre.
He did The Doors. It's one of my favorites of all time.
He did do The Doors, yeah. He did that
Born on the 4th of July.
movie.
Dude, he's got bangers.
Did he do World Trade Center with Nicolas Cage?
He did.
Not a banger.
I have not seen that.
But
I haven't seen his like 2000s movies as much. I've seen all of them from like the 90s back.
That movie was like, let me try and pull on the patriotic heartstrings of the Academy, and maybe.
That's so weird that he would do that, because he also did JFK.
Oh God, yeah, that movie that movie is interesting. It's kind of messy, but that
movie is a big ol' honkin' interesting mess.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting though.
It's cool though. I like it. And I like that whole JFK, like, I just like that world of theory. You know?
I actually like that movie is extremely entertaining. Like, and the performances in it are really good and whatnot. So,
yeah. Well, somehow we've gotten to Oliver Stone talk after Man Bites Dog. So yeah, well, I definitely need to watch this Savages movie now, or do I? Is it that bad?
Dude, it's so bad.
Is it bad in the way that it's irredeemable?
Okay, you know what? I feel like you should just watch it, and then you let me know whether or not you want to talk about it. I would be like 100% down to talk about it, but I will be furious when we do.
Maybe we'll do that and Crash.
Oh, dude, we have to. Okay, if we do Crash, though, we have to involve Jeff, because like, he'll know exactly. He'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and you will too when you see it. You'll be like, "Holy shit! This movie won Best Picture."
Yeah, I have seen it. I saw it in high school. I don't remember it at all.
Oh, okay. Thank God. Okay. I was like, oh, shit. Yeah.
I don't know, but I guess let's wrap up Man Bites Dog, man.
I'm down.
Yeah, Man Bites Dog. I think it probably deserves its place in the lexicon for what it did at the time. And I think that's probably why it's part of their Criterion collection and stuff. I don't know the exact rationale, but I think if you approach it as a cinematic time capsule of like audacity, more so than being like a really good movie, then I think it's easier to sort of understand why it's interesting if you look at it from that regard. Yeah. At least it is for me. But I mean, besides that, I don't know. It was kind of flat. I liked the attempt. It was interesting, but it just didn't have enough texture for me to latch onto.
Yeah. No, I think that's extremely fair, and that's a really good way to put it. I think I would only ever recommend this film to cinephiles, right? Which kind of tracks along with what you're saying. Like, only to a special breed of movie fan would I be like, hey, you should check this film out, just because I think it might perk up some interesting points in your head, you know, like, and that's it. Like, if
this were roles reversed, you would be the only person I would conceivably ever recommend this to.
Yeah.
For sure.
You know, like I would be terrified if I accidentally mixed up the VHS of this and Coda when I was giving my grandma the movie, you know?
Yeah. You're like, no, grandma, don't watch that.
Yeah. And I'm still using VHSs, yes, people, because it's my grandma. Okay.
Well, it's going to be interesting going to our next one, because our next film is like the antithesis to this in terms of the book reports that we're doing. Because I'm making you watch Iron Man.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
I had a drunk thought the other night, and I drunk texted Alex, and I was like, I want to make you watch all the Marvel movies. And obviously, we'll probably never do that, but the thinking, I don't know. We'll get into the thinking next time. Nobody's even going to be here at the end of this anyway.
Hey, we're gonna at least start the journey, right? And we're gonna start the journey. Iron Man, so
yeah, I have a whole thought process and spiel about this, but I will leave it for that.
Good antidote.
It makes sense. I promise it makes some sense. It's not just me being a fanboy. I have my reasons.
I mean, it's definitely gonna be like the antidote to this film as far as movie goes, right? Like what this film lacked in moviness.
It's a movie. It's fucking Iron Man. You can't get more movie.
Oh shit.
You can't get more modern movie than that.
RDJ, baby.
RDJ. Hell yeah. All right, let's get out of here. Reel Weirdos, bringing you a book report about a movie because that makes sense. Coming out with us on Reel Weirdos Pod at Twitter. And say what's up in the comments. Did you like Man Bites Dog? What's your deal? Like, what do you think about this movie? If you made it to the end here, if you didn't, well, I guess you won't hear this then. But you know what I'm saying. Say what's up. Let us know what you think, and we will catch you all next time.
Have a good morning.
Peace, love, and hand grenades. Woof woof. Chicka chacka chapo. Now our podcast is done, and we have to run. We know it is sad, but we had so much fun. Don't be bereft, Jesse, Alex, and Jeff. We'll be back real soon. The Reel Weirdos. We talk about movies for way too goddamn long. Bo 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 bo.